Now, what's the mission for you guys?
Mission 1 was to approach that first village, project legitimacy, authority, and power of the Afghan government. And mission went well. You know, there's this cliche that, you know, in Afghanistan, you go into a village, you have tea, you have a wonderful conversation with the elders, and then they apologize that on the way out that you're going to have a gunfight because that's just what they have to do to maintain their own legitimacy and optics with their people or whomever else is watching. So we had a lovely gunfight on the way out the door. Nobody got particularly hurt, and that was operation number 1. Pretty traditional problem set for that region. The second operation, which is a follow-on operation, was a known planned event. They knew we were coming. We told them we were coming. We told them what day we were coming on. And we told them we wanted to have a sit-down meeting. We wanted to have a conversation. But this time, because they already knew that we'd had this conversation in the previous village, this time around, we're coming in knowing that there might be a threat and that we're prepared for that threat and that we'll be coming in with that posture and that we hope that they're going to have a conversation with us. But if it's not a conversation, we're there to fight, but we're not there to stay. We'll retract and we'll come back another day and it'll be full combat. Their choice. And we put that onus on them and we made it very clear. So on the second operation, which unfortunately it's a compromised operation, you told the enemy what time you're coming. You told them when you're, how you're coming, because there's only one way in. And everyone that we work with, we can't put them on isolation. So our Afghans, we told them the plan and had to send them home. You can't just lock them down on base. Just doesn't work that way. So everyone knows what's going to happen the next day. It's a compromised operation. Just is what it is.
Yeah.
We go into the village, and on this specific objective, some of the usual risk factors that we would see had changed. They had already put decoys out on the road that looked like IEDs to stall us, to stop our ground movement with vehicles. They had turned off all the lights in the village. So there was no lighting whatsoever. So it was just one generator. It's a small village, but there was no light in the village. And it was completely dead silent. So clearly something had changed. It was a different village than we had seen before. And we'll get to it eventually, but unbeknownst to us is because the enemy had changed. So as we're going into the village, we encounter fire, which we had expected and we'd planned for. And what was different about the fire that we were experiencing was it was immediate, it was furious, it was planned, it was coordinated, and it was effective. That was different. Usually when you go into a village like this, they don't want to decisively engage you. They actually do not want to stay and fight. They want to get a couple pot shots off, they want to make their point, and they want to go before the helicopters come on station or their artillery rounds start to hit on top of them. They want to get out of there. This time it was immediate, decisive, and you could tell they wanted to stay and fight because it's coming directly from the village. That's a change in TTPs and tactics for the enemies. So we looked at the threat, we understood it. At this time, we wanted to start to call in our plan to withdraw because we weren't there to stay and fight. We were there to talk. As we said, we'll fight our way back and we'll come back another day. Well, this is where we start getting into some of the problems. We had pre-planned artillery targets, and we had a pre-planned artillery target that was a linear target that would put down smoke between us and the village. So, you know, for those who don't understand what a pre-planned artillery target is, it means that you, before the mission, went in, you talked to the fire support officer, and you dumped into their computers a pre-coordinated target with the type of rounds that you want. Mm-hmm. And the firing batteries know that that pre-planned target is going to be called potentially, so they have the rounds waiting, ready to go.
You don't have to decide, communicate.
There's no thinking. Delay. You push a button, that target gets fired, you get the effects that you want. Mm-hmm. And those rounds are ready to go. They don't have to go looking through the, through the cargo hold looking for the rounds. This is all pre-planned. The type, where they go, what gets shot when. Well, this is where the breakdown happens. They wouldn't fire the target. The coalition, the local coalition partners would not fire that target for us.
Which are Afghan?
Which are Americans.
Americans, okay.
And this is a problem because it's a pre-coordinated target. Mm-hmm. And that means, according to the way that the U.S. fights, mm-hmm. as a professional warfighter, I have certain capabilities that I expect to be there, kind of like brakes on a car. Yeah. If you go for the brakes, you expect them to be there. If the brakes aren't there, that's a problem. And in this case, those were our brakes. We're doing an operation. We're going in full speed. We're coming up to a corner. We're going for the brakes now because clearly the corner's sharper than we thought, and we have to adjust. Well, the brakes aren't there. It starts falling apart. in the absence of having that pre-planned fire, the pre-planned fires, we were exposed, completely exposed. And we go to plan B, start trying to fire the other pre-planned targets that were on the known locations that the enemy had previously used to shoot at us. I mean, this is such a routine operation that we know where the enemy's going to be and where they're going to shoot at us. We know they're going to go into the cave. They know we're going to retract, and that's the end of it. In this case, some of those targets were there, but not all of them. Those targets were down in the village. Well, politics had changed. For us to fire into the village, couldn't do it. It's a village. They're civilians, which is true. Well, now we don't have our pre-planned targets that were going to provide us our screen to withdraw. We can't fire on the actual known enemy locations because they're in the village. They're using the village as cover. And now we're starting to take casualties. And this is decisive fire. It's different. It's effective. It's continuous. Call in the helicopters. Helicopters are unavailable. They're tasked out somewhere else. All right, well, you never plan on helicopters, you plan on artillery. Well, the artillery wasn't working. So now the brakes aren't working, the gas is broken, and the steering wheel is coming loose. Operation's falling apart. Again, you expect all these things to be here. That's the professional way of fighting.
Right.
More casualties mount. Time goes on. And at this juncture, we have lost contact with our forward element of Afghans and their Marine advisors. So you had 3 Marines, 1 Navy corpsman, and you had the advanced platoon of the Afghans. No comms. And it sounded pretty dire the last time we had comms with them.
This is between you and the village, the opposing force.
Yep. So myself and my colleague, who were actually in the supporting role with the Afghan border police in the rear, we moved to the front, to the element that the Marine headquarters element is located in, which is fairly close to where they lost contact with their Marines further forward. And we're about, I'd say, 300 meters from the village now at this point. And the Marines that were lost were about 50 meters from the village. So we are now trying to figure out how to move forward and recover contact with that element. But it's becoming very clear that we can't do that. It's just not going to happen because our headquarters element now starts to take casualties. And before you know it, the Marine Corps major who's in charge of the operation, ultimately, he gets shot. His sergeant major gets a massive concussion from our RPG that hits right next to his head. The Afghans that are with us, killed. Interpreters, dead. You start racking up serious casualties. And during all this, the enemy is actually flanking us, which is something new. It's different. We're not used to being flanked. Usually the enemy doesn't want to maneuver on you because they know if they do, they're exposed and the helicopters will eventually clean them up or we'll drop artillery or we'll outflank them. In this case, they knew that they had taken the day. And some of our actual supporting elements that were further up in the ridge lines, they too are getting directly attacked and maneuvered on. This is different. So with all of this happening, and with effectively only now 3 U.S. coalition that are not killed or injured seriously, we have a serious problem on our hands. How do we do a mass casualty evacuation under direct fire of the enemy? And we have to maneuver across effectively a kilometer of open space. Well, that's what we had to do. And so for the better part of 2 hours, we had to do a succession of bounds backwards without any supporting artillery fire that was effective because they wouldn't drop in the village, without any helicopter support, and with even our supporting elements being engaged to the point where they could not provide us with the effective fire that we were going to require to pull out. So that was about 2 hours. As we were moving back, taking more and more casualties, we finally got closer to where we'd put our ORP, our release point. And that's when we started to get some of the support from the vehicle patrol base that we'd set up further down. And we got a Humvee up online with us that was able to start putting down effective fire. And at that time, we got helicopter support coming on board. Usually when helicopters come on board, Taliban stops firing.
Yeah.
They kept shooting. Helicopters were kind of confused by this. They have a lot of targets. They're buried deep in the village, and they have to find out if they can engage. As they engage, it's a village. Walls are about a meter or 2 thick. You know, these were Kiowas that came on station. Kiowas have a 50 cal, and they have a couple of Hellfires. By and large, the Hellfires will punch through a wall, but they only carry 2. The 50 cal is mostly there for theatrics. We had these helicopter pilots going Winchester. They blew through all of their ammo supporting us, and then stayed on station as long as they could until their personal weapons were dry. They took effective fire and had to go back, refuel back at the FARP, and some of their aircraft had been hit. So we're talking about this is a changed situation. Up in the air, on the ground. But we still have 3 missing Marines, a missing Navy corpsman, and all of their Afghans that are somewhere up in the village. So we start getting some CASEVAC in. We start moving some of our injured off the battlefield. We try to get ourselves recollected. And between myself and a few of the uninjured Americans, we cobbled together a QRF force to go back up to the objective and start to try to find the wounded, dead, and missing.
So for those, it's a quick reaction force.
Yep. And in the interest of of speed and availability, my personal vehicle, which is an unarmored Ford truck, we used that because it was a great idea. Why not?
Yeah.
And so myself and a few other people hopped into my unarmored truck, and with the support of a Humvee, an armored Humvee in back of us, we drove back up towards the village trying to find the wounded and dead. And there was a significant amount of wounded and dead. And as we moved up the valley, we grabbed who we could, when we could, and we turned back, drop them off, go back up again, repeat, load up the dead and wounded, return back, and just keep trying to fight our way up the valley. At some point, my truck had it. It was shot up. It was a total mess. It was a really bad idea. And some more of the armored vehicles had made it up to the ORP. So we swapped out my vehicle and we went back up into the objective with a few more armored vehicles.
So
we get closer. We swapped out for armor, and we got right up into the village. And around this time, we had, and this is about 6 hours into the battle now, 6 hours. By this point now, we have Kiowas, we have Apaches, we have F-15s, we have a B-1 on station. I mean, we were starting to get some real assets, and the local coalition owners realized, oops, we probably should have started hitting that village sooner. Now they're allowing more free fire on the targets that needed to get hit, but we're still taking fire. The medevac birds are taking rounds. The Kiowas are getting shot at. It's a very different battle. And through all of this, you're looking at an entrenched enemy in hardened structures with trench lines to operate with, where they can maneuver without being engaged by helicopters or by our supporting elements. We have 15 wounded and dead. We have 15 dead. We have wounded everywhere. Comms are lost. And we still cannot find our Marines and our Navy corpsmen. On our last trip up, the Kiowas had spotted, actually we had a PJ bird come on station at this point. One of the PJ birds came on board. They did a swoop over the village. They spotted the dead. It was clear that we had lost our Marine Corps element and our Navy corpsmen, and it became a recovery mission. Went back out, picked them up, got them in the vehicles. We said, that's it, we're out. Returned back to the ORP, head back to base. Established a position to hold what we had, and we had to do a reset at that point. Mass casualty event, and we clearly had to reboot and restock. We didn't know quite what we were up against. What we realized was we had a significant change in who we were fighting against. So later that evening, we had, after we started getting reinforcements brought in, we had an ODA go through with their team and clear the village. At that time, all the weapons had been hidden.
Say ODA for those listening is it's the
Special Forces team.
Green Berets.
Yeah, so as Green Berets go in, a Special Forces team goes into the village at night. And at this point, most of the fighters had already withdrawn back into the Pakistani side. They'd been observed doing so by our aviation. And, it was an unfortunate situation that we basically let them escape. But they knew what they were doing. But ultimately, some good did come of this. The resiliency of the Afghan government was shown. The commitment of the Afghan warfighter was proven. And more importantly, I think, the Afghans saw that the Americans were willing to fight alongside of them, for them, and even put themselves at great risk to recover them if need be. So that really helped build that bond in a way that I don't think had been really forged before. There was a distrust. And at this point, that trust was built. Obviously, we had lost a significant amount of people, but we had forged trust, at least in understanding we meant we were going to fight side by side for each other, with each other, for the objective of better Afghanistan.